1903 portrait of a young girl. Zoom in on her eyes to uncover a terrifying, sinister secret. Rain whipped against the windows as Claire stepped into the cramped thrift shop, a shabby little place brimming with dust and forgotten memories. The air hung thick and stifling, every creak of the old floorboards echoing like ghostly whispers. In the dim light, she sifted through a jumble of items, desperate to find a little treasure to brighten her home. That's when she spotted it, an old portrait, dusty and shrouded in shadows. Its aged frame contained the haunting image of a girl named Mary, her eyes glimmering with an unsettling allure. That piercing gaze seemed to follow Claire, pulling her in with an invisible thread. A chill raced down her spine. Something about Mary felt too alive, too attentive. With a thrill of adrenaline, Claire purchased the portrait, believing she had salvaged a forgotten piece of history. Little did she know, she'd unknowingly invited something far more sinister. As the days rolled on, the atmosphere in her home thickened, wrapping itself around Claire like a smothering fog. Laughter that once danced through their cozy living room now faded into tense silences. Sophie, her 8-year-old daughter, became trapped in a world of shadows. No longer the bubbly spark she once was, she huddled in corners, whispering secrets that left Claire's heart racing. Her little girl now spoke of a voice, one that echoed with fear. "Mommy, it tells me things. Scary things," Sophie would say, her voice quivering. Claire chuckled, dismissing it as imaginative play, but a gnawing sensation crept deeper, planting its roots in her chest. That night, Claire was jolted awake, a cold sweat soaking her sheets. Shadows loomed in the corners of her room, thick and breathing. She heard it, a faint whisper creeping into her consciousness like a serpent coiling around her throat. Panic gripped her as she stumbled into the living room, her eyes drawn to the portrait that now seemed to thrum with dark energy. Sophie's words echoed in her mind as if the painting itself was alive, sinister and beckoning. "Mommy, it's watching, it's outside. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Heart pounding, Claire leaned closer to the painting, those haunting eyes seemingly drilling into her soul. The whispers crescendoed, a cacophony of dread that washed over her like ice water. She stumbled back, gasping as memories of the town's dark past crashed into her mind like a nightmare. Mary's story was more tragic than she could have fathomed. Abducted, lost, and mourned, her soul entwined with the very fabric of Maplewood. What had she brought into her home? Sophie screamed from her room, wrenching Claire from her thoughts. "Mommy! He's here." The dread solidified into a visceral fear as Claire realized the truth. This wasn't just a painting, it was an omen. The malevolence surrounding them was insidious, and she was racing against time. The comfort of their suburban home felt warped, like the walls themselves whispered secrets too terrifying to grasp. What awaited her beyond the fragile veil of normalcy? How could she protect her children when the real monster lurked beneath their trusting smiles? Claire stood, frozen in fear before the portrait, wrestling with the chilling reality. Was she destined to confront a legacy of evil, or was it already too late? Claire surged toward Sophie's room, her pulse a frantic drumbeat. She pushed open the door, the hinges creaking like tortured souls. The dim light cast eerie shadows that danced across the walls, morphing into grotesque shapes. There, in the corner, was her daughter, huddled and trembling, eyes wide with terror. "Mommy," Sophie whimpered, "he's in my room." In that moment, the air grew heavy, a suffocating blanket of dread. Claire knelt beside her, grasping her little hands, their warmth barely comforting through her panic. "Sweetheart, who's here?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Sophie pointed, her finger trembling. "The man. I saw him, he's right there." Claire's heart sank. She swept her gaze to the darkness framing the window, but saw nothing. Just the rain cascading down like ghostly fingers streaming across the glass. "It's just the lightning, baby," she tried to reassure her. But as she spoke, a shadow flickered in the corner, dark and alive. Then came the whisper, crawling under her skin, wrapping around her thoughts. "Let her go." Claire felt it wrap tighter, squeezing her throat. The voice was deep, guttural, filled with menace. She clenched her teeth, fighting to stay grounded. "Sophie, we need to go," she urged, pulling her daughter to her feet. But the girl hesitated, her gaze glued to a spot just beyond her mother. "He doesn't want us to. He said we can't leave." Desperation clawed at Claire. She felt undermined by an unseen force, a bitter chill wrapping itself around her. "Listen to me," she said, voice steady as she fought through the mounting terror. "We are leaving now." Clenching Sophie's tiny hand, Claire backed toward the door, every instinct screaming at her to flee. Shadows shifted, twisting at the edges of her vision. The wallpaper seemed to pulse, breathing with a life of its own. "You shouldn't have taken it," the whisper echoed again, louder, more menacing. She turned back toward the portrait, which now loomed ominously in the hallway, its once elegant frame seeming to twist and change, exposing something dark and putrid beneath. Claire lunged out of the room, pulling Sophie behind her. They raced down the stairs, two hearts racing in sync with the pounding of the rain against the walls. But as they reached the front door, an icy draft blew through, slamming the door shut before they could escape. It rattled on its hinges, and Claire could feel the force of something pushing against it, a relentless barrier. "No. Please, let us out," she cried. Sophie clutched her mother's side, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He won't let us go." The room spun, the whispers grew deafening, a storm of voices clamoring. Claire pressed her palms against the door, willing it to yield as she pulled her daughter close. The air crackled with malevolence. Suddenly, the portrait flickered in her mind, its girl's eyes glimmering with something akin to satisfaction. "You invited me," it seemed to whisper. "No." Claire screamed. Her world, once filled with warmth and love, now twisted into a waking nightmare. With a surge of primal instinct, she turned to Sophie, shaking her. "We need to do this together. Can you hear me? Whatever is here, we fight it." The light flickered momentarily, revealing soft, elongated shadows creeping toward them. A spine-chilling realization washed over Claire. She had to face whatever evil lurked behind the painted eyes. And then, with a deep breath, she yelled, "Leave us alone." The voice stilled, the shadows paused and then erupted. The door rattled violently as if a powerful wind howled outside. Would they break through the malevolence or be swallowed whole? In the lingering silence, an uncomfortable thrill coursed through her. What have we unleashed? Claire thought, heart pounding furiously. Something was shifting. Sophie's eyes widened again, fixated in fear. "Mommy, look!" Before Claire could respond, the shadows curled back, revealing a figure emerging from darkness, smirking with electric malice. Whatever it was, deeper terror waited, and it was very hungry. Sophie's grip tightened around Claire's hand, her small body shaking as the figure emerged. Shadows wrapped around it like a cloak, twisting and flickering like dying flames. The smirk widened, revealing teeth that glinted with a sickly sheen. "No, no, no!" Claire gasped, backing away, her heart racing. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating her. The whispers grew louder now, spilling over each other, feeding the growing sense of hopelessness. "You called me," the figure crooned, voice slithering through the dark, wrapping around Claire's mind. Tendrils of fear crawled up her spine. She had felt something shift the moment they gazed upon that cursed portrait. Whatever she had invited into their lives was now very much alive, and it was looking right at them. "What do you want?" Claire shouted, her voice trembling. The figure laughed, a low, guttural sound that sent icy sparks down her arms. She will join me. Just like you invited her. It pointed at Sophie, and Claire felt a pull in her chest, a deep yearning more potent than fear. Mommy. Sophie whimpered, terror etched across her young face. No. Claire cried, her resolve hardening. I want to let you take her. With each word, she felt a flicker of defiance. A reminder that they were still alive, still together, and that something deep within her was willing to fight. The figure's face morphed, the girl in the portrait slipping away to reveal a distorted visage, eyes swirling with darkness. You don't understand. There's no escape. I will have what belongs to me. Those words hit Claire like a physical blow. They rumbled through her, resonating with a horrible truth. What do you mean? What belongs to you? She shouted, trying to hold the fragments of her sanity as best she could under the mounting pressure. The whispers escalated, a chilling chorus of voices. The painting, the girl, she was never just art. The shadows shifted again, pushing closer. You, Claire, and her, you are the key. No. Claire yelled. Above the chaos, one thought crystallized: she had to shield Sophie from whatever this creature planned. Let her go. Claire demanded, desperation coursing through her veins. The figure flickered, hesitating just for a heartbeat before drawing closer. You saw the truth in the painting. You knew. You should have left it alone. With an almost primal roar, Claire shoved against the door with every ounce of strength she could muster. It barely budged, but she felt a flicker of light behind her, warmth pushing back against the icy tendrils of dark. Sophie squeezed her hand tighter, small fingers trembling but resolute. I won't give in. Claire screamed. I will fight. The figure shuddered, shadows recoiling slightly as fear began to seep into its smirk. What have you done? It hissed, voice tightening in rage. Mommy, I'm scared. Sophie's voice trembled, small but resilient, tugging at her heart as Claire turned to look at her. I'm here, sweetheart. Just hold on to me. Claire dug deep, grasping Sophie's hand more firmly. She faced the figure, refusing to relent as shadows lashed out wildly, tying itself around her. You can't take her. You'll have to kill me first. The laughter that erupted from the figure was sickening, echoing in a cacophony that rattled the very bones of the house. Oh, my dear, if only you knew this is not a choice I make lightly. I have waited too long, and I will not be denied. With that, the shadows writhed, consuming the air, darkening the room as they closed in. But Claire felt something stir inside her, a blazing light igniting against the suffocating presence. Together, as one, they would face this darkness. Claire raised her free hand, feeling warmth emanate from her heart, as if Sophia's innocence fueled it. You will not win. The shadows hesitated, twisting back, revealing a path to the door, just for a moment. What is happening? Sophie whispered, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Let us run. Claire shouted, and they darted toward the opening, hearts pounding with the pulse of impending madness. The very walls of the house echoed with screams and whispers, but Claire was ready. Whatever this thing was, they were going to fight back. They might not make it, but they were going to try. As they reached the door, she pushed it wide open, feeling the rush of cold air burying them. But as they stepped out into the storm, a piercing shriek rang behind them, chilling her to the bone. You think you're free? You'll never escape me. What had they awakened? Claire glanced back at the dark silhouette framed by their shattered home, feeling a profound chill deep in her bones. Mommy, is it coming? Sophie's voice quivered. In that gut-wrenching moment, Claire knew they had only begun to scratch the surface of their nightmare. And as the shadows loomed larger behind them, the storm twisting malevolently, she realized the true fight had only begun. The air outside felt as sharp as glass, slicing through the momentary relief of escaping the darkened house. Claire and Sophie sprinted down the gravel path, hearts pounding like tribal drums in the night. Sophie's grip was tight, her little feet hurried in an attempt to keep up as Claire led the way through the tempestuous storm. Behind them, the wailing of the figure echoed louder, twisting and curling through the wild winds. It was a sound steeped in hunger, desperation, something that promised calamity. "You can't run forever," it taunted, the voice intertwining with the howl of the wind. Each syllable dripped with malice, looping back to echo in Claire's mind like a gruesome lullaby. "Mommy, what's happening?" Sophie cried, her breaths quick and sharp, eyes wide, reflecting the terror in Claire's heart. "We just need to get away." Claire gasped, forcing every ounce of her will into her legs, surging toward the tree-line. The dense foliage loomed ahead like a dark fortress, but it felt like the only sanctuary. She tried to ignore the weight of fear clenching at her stomach, suffocating as surely as the shadows had tried to. As they reached the edge of the woods, the world seemed to dim. The farmhouse behind them flickered, its very essence bending and warping under the pressure of that darkness. Claire turned back warily, a cold sweat cooling her temples. "We have to keep moving." "Yes, but what if it follows us?" Sophie's voice trembled, full of innocence and a fear that struck Claire like a hammer. "It can't. We have to find help," she shouted, pushing them deeper into the dark embrace of the trees. The branches clawed at their clothes, a reminder of the dangers lurking only steps behind. A sudden stillness enveloped them as they crept further away from the clearing. The trees whispered amongst themselves, rustling secrets and warnings through the wind. Claire shuddered at the intensity of the silence that pressed down on them, suffocating in a different way now. "Mommy?" Sophie pulled on her sleeve, eyes glistening with apprehension. "What if the portrait really wants me? What if I'm supposed to go back?" "No. You are not going anywhere near it." Claire's voice cracked, a mix of urgency and fierce protection. "I will keep you safe. I promise." But as she uttered those words, the earth beneath them trembled. A sharp crack sliced through the air, followed by a low growl that resonated from the shadows. Claire's heart jumped. This wasn't just mental terror, this curse had a physical manifestation, waiting just beyond their sight. "Run!" she screamed, and they tore through the underbrush, branches snapping violently underfoot. The growl morphed into a cacophony of howls, the dark energy flaring behind them, hungry for revenge. "What did we unleash?" Claire whispered under her breath, a thought that chilled her even further. They burst into a clearing, lit only by the dim glow of an unnatural light. It almost looked like the hand of someone beckoning them, but Claire knew better by now. This isn't right, we can't trust anything. In the center of the clearing stood an abandoned well, its stones mossy and ancient, a gaping maw swallowing the light. That wasn't the only thing, an ethereal glow pulsed from deep within it, beckoning but warning at the same time. The ground shook again, and the howling grew louder, spinning around them like a vortex. Claire squeezed Sophie's hand tighter, feeling the warmth that poured from her daughter. "We can't." Before she could complete her sentence, they heard it, a voice, clear and melodic, cutting through the chaos. "Help me." Sophie's eyes widened, shimmering with curiosity. "Mommy, she needs help." "No!" Claire shouted, but it was too late. Sophie dashed toward the well, drawn by an inexplicable urge, her small form a beacon of innocence rushing to danger. "Stop!" Claire dove after her, the ground shaking violently now, her voice raw as she fought to reach her daughter. But as she grasped for Sophie, darkness erupted from the well, tendrils snaking into the air, stretching toward them with an insatiable hunger. Everything froze: time, breath, hope. What was waiting for them in the depths of the well? Would they ever find out before the darkness consumed them both? Sophie was nearly gone, her small form swallowed by the creeping shadows that spilled from the well like a living thing. The tendrils twisted and curled with a malevolent grace, threatening to pull her into the void. Claire's heart pounded in her chest, blood roaring in her ears. "No!" she screamed, desperation sharpening her voice into a razor's edge. With a surge of adrenaline, Claire lunged forward, her fingers outstretched, teeth gritted. She saw Sophie's face, the innocent curiosity shining in her wide eyes, unrecognizing of the danger inching closer. It was a moment suspended in horror. Just as Claire's hand grasped Sophie's wrist, the darkness tightened, wrapping around them like 1,000 hands intent on dragging them down. "Mommy! I'm scared." Sophie whimpered, the fear in her eyes hitting Claire like a physical blow. She could feel the pulsing energy from the well, seductive and grave, wrapping itself around them and whispering forgotten secrets. "Hold on!" Claire cried, pulling with all her might. The darkness hissed, its voice slithering into her mind. "Come closer, you won't resist, just let go. Let go." Claire shouted defiantly, her resolve hardening. "I want to let you take her." In a frantic surge, she yanked Sophie back, pulling her into an embrace that felt both safe and terrifying. The tendrils writhed, desperate to reclaim their prize, but Claire managed to stumble backward, dragging Sophie with her. They fell to the ground just as the insidious whispers grew louder, transforming into a torrent of anguished cries. Broken souls, seeking escape, seeking vengeance. "Mommy!" Sophie cried, shivering against Claire as they huddled on the forest floor, the chill of the moss seeping into their clothes. Suddenly, the whispers were gone. A heavy silence took their place. Claire looked up, heart racing. She felt it in the air, a change. The darkness had retreated, almost as if it had taken a breath, waiting. "What was that?" Sophie whispered, her voice trembling, bewildered. Claire exhaled, forcing back her own fear. I think it wanted to take you. But we're safe now." Yet, the doubt was clear in her voice. She didn't feel safe. In fact, the feeling of being watched, of something lurking in the dark, clawed at her. As they stood to their feet, the well loomed before them, the glow still pulsing ominously. "We shouldn't stay here," Claire urged, tugging at Sophie's hand. She glanced back one last time at the well, its depths yawned wide and hungry. Sophie, however, seemed entranced, her eyes fixed on the glowing light. "Mommy, maybe it's not bad, what if we can help her?" "Stop!" Claire snapped, whatever shred of patience she had slipping away. "We cannot help anything that comes from there. It's dangerous." Tension sliced through the atmosphere. The air became thick, heavy with an unspoken dread, a pressing awareness that they were not alone. The darkness seemed to twist with malevolence, sensing their fear. Then, up ahead, movement caught Claire's eye, a silhouette flitting between the trees. Panic surged as she squinted into the dim light. It was too fast, too erratic. "Is someone else here?" Before she could process the thought, the howl erupted again, not just behind them but echoing throughout the woods, a monstrous, bone-chilling sound. "Run!" Claire shouted, her instincts kicking in again. They dove back into the forest, branches clawing at them, pulses of adrenaline almost drowning out the howling chaos. But just as they fled, Claire felt it, the unmistakable pressure crawling across her skin, a sudden unabridged sense of isolation that was worse than death. They weren't just running from the pursuit, they were being hunted, the earth shaking with the dark dance of whatever sought them. What was this entity? What horrors awaited deeper in those shadows? And would they find refuge anywhere, or was it too late for them both? The trees loomed tall and twisted, their gnarled branches weaving a dark canopy that swallowed the fading light. Claire's heart raced, each beat a frantic reminder of the danger pressing in around them. Sophie clutched her mother's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling against the coolness of Claire's skin. The howling faded momentarily, but it left a sinister echo in its wake, ghostly whispers trailing through the forest like a fog of uncertainty. "Keep moving," Claire urged, urgency driving her forward. She glanced back, half expecting to see the silhouette emerge again, heightened by fear and adrenaline. But the shadows remained still, cloaked in an eerie silence that felt heavier than the darkness itself. They pushed deeper into the woods, branches cracking underfoot, and Claire's mind raced through their options. There had to be a way out. There had to be a place to hide. But the cloying scent of earth after rain mixed with the shadows made it hard to think straight. Every rustle set her on edge. "Mommy, please, I'm tired," Sophie whimpered, her small voice barely slicing through the oppressive stillness. Claire stopped, kneeling to meet her gaze, eyes wide with panic and courage. "I know, sweetie. But we can't stop. Not yet. We have to keep going." Suddenly, something large moved to their right, a dark blur slicing through the gloom. Claire sucked in a breath, pulling Sophie closer. "We need to go. Now." They ran again, but the once familiar path felt different, shifting, twisting into unfamiliar terrain. Claire's instincts screamed to turn back, to find some comfort in the way they came, but she resisted. There was no safety there, only the well and the malevolent force that lurked within. As they stumbled forward, Sophie tripped, falling to the ground with a gasp. "Mommy!" The urgency in her voice tugged at Claire's heart. She helped Sophie to her feet, but the moment hung an eternity caught in absolute silence, as if the forest paused to draw a breath, baiting them. Then it came an echoing cacophony, a creature's howl that pierced through the stillness, raw and hungry. "Run!" Claire commanded, forcing Sophie ahead of her. They tore through the trees, branches snagging at their clothes, the underbrush crunching beneath their hurried steps. Suddenly, Sophie stopped once more, eyes wide and fixated. "Mommy, look!" Claire turned, dread pooling in her gut. Through the trees, a flickering light danced, an eerie glow guiding them. The air crackled around it. It pulled at Sophie, a moth to a flame, delighting in its sinister allure. "No! Get back!" Claire shouted, instinctively pulling Sophie to her. "It's not safe." But Sophie's gaze was locked, like she could see something beyond those shadows, something that promised hope, perhaps even salvation. "What if it's good, Mommy? What if it can help us?" Claire's hands tightened on Sophie's shoulders, panic surging through her veins. "We don't know what that thing is. We can't trust anything here." The howl echoed again, closer this time, and the flicker of light dimmed as if the creature drew its breath, ready to pounce. Claire felt it, a whisper brushed against her consciousness, seductive and chilling. "Join us, you can't fight what you desire." The words twisted through Claire's mind, nearly sending her to her knees. She dug her fingernails into Sophie's skin, grounding herself in the reality of her daughter's small frame next to her. She couldn't let herself be swayed. "No!" she screamed, drowning out the whispers. And then, the darkness surged forward, a wave of shadow, a living thing hungry to consume. They were not just running from a creature, they were being engulfed by the very essence of nightmares. "Mommy!" Sophie squealed, terror-stricken, as the ground trembled beneath them, shifting with a heartbeat that echoed the growing dread. Out of nowhere, Claire spotted an old cabin, barely visible through the shroud of trees. "In there!" she yelled, redirecting their frantic dash. As they sprinted toward the door, Claire felt the cold fingers of darkness grasping at her ankles. She hesitated for a split second, but it was enough. A shadow lunged, snatching Sophie from Claire's grasp. The world screamed in silence as Claire faced the horror of losing everything. The cabin door slammed shut behind her. Would the darkness follow? Would it sweep her away, too, leaving nothing but echoes in the night? The cabin's air was thick and stale, the rot of forgotten years saturating every inch of wood and cobweb. Claire slammed the door behind her, the sound reverberating like a warning. Heart racing, she pressed her back against the door, gasping for breath. Her mind scrambled to process what had just happened, but an instinctual dread clawed at her throat. "Sophie!" she shouted, voice trembling as it bounced off the cabin's walls. Fear pooled in her stomach. Had the shadow taken her little girl? She flicked her gaze around the tiny room. Dust-coated furniture loomed in the half-light, casting long shadows that danced mockingly. A table stood to one side, a single chair tipped over beneath it. The faint whimper of Sophie echoed from a corner, a sound like glass breaking in her chest. Claire rushed toward the noise, pushing past the growing sensation of despair wrapping tighter around her. "Sophie! Where are you?" But the shadows clung to the walls like suffocating veils, steeped in the stench of decay. There was no answer, only the erratic rhythm of her pulse pounding in her ears, drowning out everything else. "Sophie!" This time, it came out as a plea, one drenched in terror. With shaky hands, Claire flicked the latch on the door to check if it had held. The steady creaking of the cabin felt like thunder in the oppressive silence. To her relief, the door remained closed, but the darkness beyond felt alive, breathing, watching. More noises came, muffled and pitiful. Claire's heart twisted painfully, she followed the sound like a compass pointing south. She reached a grimy back room, and there she found Sophie, huddled against the wall, her small frame trembling like a leaf. Claire fell to her knees, eyes wide. "Baby!" She reached for her, grasping Sophie's shoulders, relief crashing over her like a wave. But something was wrong. "What is it, sweetie? Are you hurt?" Sophie looked up, her eyes reflecting a strange light that Claire couldn't place. "Mommy, it called to me." "What do you mean? What called to you?" Claire's throat tightened with a creeping dread, her instincts warning her that whatever Sophie had heard was more than just a sound. "The light, it wanted me to come closer," Sophie whispered, a shiver running through her small body. "But I remembered you." Claire's heart sank as she wrapped her arms tightly around her daughter, pulling her close. The whispers from the woods had burrowed deeper. "We need to leave, now. Whatever is out there wants to take you away." Sophie shook her head. "Mommy, I don't want to go back. I liked it." Claire's heart plummeted. A dark realization struck her harder than a physical blow. "No. You can't say that." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them, vibrating with a low growl that echoed in their bones. The cabin shook violently as if something outside were trying to break in, to breach the fragile world they had thought safe. Claire took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Hold on to me, Sophie. We're going to find a way out." And then, just as quickly, the tremors ceased. Silence, thick and suffocating, fell over the cabin, interrupted only by a soft scratching at the door. "What was that?" Sophie gasped, her wide eyes fixed on the wooden barrier that now felt like a door to a tomb. "I don't know," Claire whispered, adrenaline surging as she turned toward the door. From the other side came a low, raspy intonation, a voice wrapped in layers of malice. "Let me in," it echoed with a chilling familiarity, like the wind wasn't whispering but conversing with their fears. Feeling as if time had stopped, Claire and Sophie locked eyes, dread pooling in the spaces between them. "Mommy, what do we do?" To answer Sophie, Claire had only one question swirling in her mind: how far would she go to protect her daughter, and what price would she pay in the process? The scratching intensified, a desperate drumroll of terror echoing in the silence of the room. And then a single, deliberate thump jolted them both. The door began to quiver in its frame. They had no time left. "Hide!" Claire shouted, instinct taking over as she shoved Sophie into a darkened corner behind a pile of rotten boxes. As she turned back to the door, a plan formed in her mind, curling with dark inevitability. The voice continued, growing louder, more insistent. "You can't escape what you've come to seek." Claire clenched her jaw, heart racing. The shadows were moving, gathering just out of sight. She had to know, she had to find out what waited behind that door. But did she dare open it? As she leaned closer, ready to face the darkness, a loud crash split the air, shaking the cabin to its core. What had she just unleashed? The cabin shuddered with a sound like splitting timber, as if an unseen beast had hurled itself at the door. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She could barely contain the impulse to flee, but where? The outside world was cloaked in malevolence, untamed and hungry. Shifting her focus back to the door, she willed it to stay intact, but the voice on the other side continued to speak. "Let me in." It was no longer just an invitation. It was a promise, a dark assurance that whatever lay beyond meant them harm. Claire looked back at Sophie, whose wide eyes glistened with tears, her small frame shrinking deeper into the shadows. "Stay quiet, baby. Trust me." Tension rippled through the air, thick enough to cut. Claire fought back her own panic and grabbed a stray chair, swinging it against a wall. "You want to play?" she hissed into the gloom. "Come and get us." The scratching at the door paused, as if taken aback by her defiance. "You want to be a coward?" she muttered, her own voice echoing back mockingly as she fought to muster the strength of a mother. But deep down, a part of her felt the heat of dread rising. Was it cowardice to want to survive? Another thump, louder this time, reverberated shockwaves through the walls. Claire advanced, clenching her fists. The tension settled like a heavy fog, saturating the air with fear. Silence reigned momentarily, interrupted only by the erratic beating of her heart. Cautiously, she edged toward the door. Voldemort was paradoxical, it was no creature and a creature all at once, a twisted parody of what should be human. In her mind, she felt a wound being torn open, a memory from long ago. The portrait of a young girl she once saw, eyes wide, haunted, her smile hinting at something sinister. As if drawn by an invisible thread, Claire placed her palm flat against the door. The rough texture bit into her skin. Whatever lay on the other side was not simply here to frighten them, it was a corporeal womb of darkness waiting to consume them. "Mommy?" Sophie's small voice shattered the silence. Claire whispered, turning her gaze back to Sophie. "We're going to get through this. I promise." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. The door trembled beneath her hand, a low growl emerging from the cracks. "You left me behind for too long." Her heart raced faster, a visceral primal scream rising in her chest. Adrenaline surged. Claire's instincts screamed to flee, to just run into the woods and trust that she could find a way home. But those woods were waiting too. "What do you want from us?" she demanded, voice low but fierce. In response, a hollow laugh echoed, it resonated in her bones, the very marrow tasting of decay. "To feel alive. Come to me." Claire's fists clenched tighter, nails digging into her palms. The door rattled, and a long crack snaked across the wood. Vision narrowed, she surged backwards, clutching Sophie to her chest. "This was a mistake," Claire murmured, and with it came a flood of regrets. The vacation, the woods, their isolation. She had dragged them here. The door splintered as a shadow pushed against it, expanding like ink spilled on paper. Claire's heart thundered violently, trapped in the chest of a terrified mother. Sophie whimpered, and Claire felt her own resolve begin to crumble. With a piercing crack, the door burst open, a burst of chilling air sweeping through the cabin, swirling with the scent of earth and rot. A darkness deeper than night cascaded inside, and for a moment, she couldn't see beyond it. "Run!" she screamed. But it wasn't her voice anymore, it was a chorus of anguish, echoing through time, always calling back to the light in her daughter's eyes. What had she really unleashed? The shadows twisted, forming a shape. Then, with a heart-stopping lunge, it reached into the cabin. What would it take to escape the grip of the past? The shadow coiled and pulsed, a living entity that breathed with an unnatural hunger. Claire's stomach dropped, but instinct kicked in. The cabin felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in, eager to consume her. "Get to the window!" she shouted at Sophie, her voice slicing through the air. But her daughter remained frozen, eyes glued to the dark mass seeping inside, terror etching deep lines on her tiny face. "No, don't look," Claire urged, pushing her towards the back wall, the last sliver of safety. The shadows flickered, revealing glimmers of something awful, a face, spectral and etched in despair. "Let me show you what it feels like." The voice was soothing yet twisted, like a lullaby sung over a grave. Claire's heart pounded violently against her ribs. "Stay close," she shouted, trying to anchor herself in the chaos, pulling Sophie against her. A chill crept along her spine, each drop of darkness promising to swallow them whole. Without thinking, she lunged for the log pile stacked in the corner. If she could just get her hands on a weapon, a tool to fend off the invisible horrors, maybe they could survive this. The air thickened with dread, and the shadows contorted, almost mocking her. Sophie whimpered, "Mommy, hold on, sweetheart." With a splintered log in hand, Claire turned her back to the door, scanning the edges of the room for an escape. But the shadows were relentless, stretching preferentially toward them, hungry for life. Before she could think, a shadow lunged, whispering like silk against her throat, "You're just as lost as I was." She swung the log wildly, hitting something solid yet intangible, a scream erupting from the dark, piercing and shrill. Her hands shook, adrenaline flooding her veins. "Get back!" she yelled, swinging again, this time aiming for the heart of the darkness that had no shape, no boundaries. With every swing, the beast snarled, an echo of a voice she recognized, twisting memories like knives in her mind. Was it her mother? A whispered promise of protection gone wrong, buried in the folds of her past. "You can't run from me." Claire, desperate, she grabbed Sophie's hand and pulled her toward the back window. The glass embered, reflecting the luminous terror outside, where trees swayed like spectral figures, gaping mouths ready to swallow them in their limbs. "Mommy, please." Sophie's voice trembled as she clung to Claire's arm, her fingers ice-cold against her skin. Suddenly, the shadows pulled back, swirling violently as if uncertain of their next move. An exit was creating itself, a gaping maw behind the rippling dark, a portal leading somewhere unfathomable. "Go!" Claire barked, urgency pressing heavily against her chest. Her hands shook, trying to shove Sophie through the narrowing space. "It's our only chance." Sophie hesitated, darting her eyes between the door and her mother. "What if it follows us?" she terrified. Her innocence exposed the twisted nature of this existence. Were they puppets, trapped in a show meant to end in screams? The walls creaked as the shadows prowled around them, waiting, hushed whispers spilling into the air like dead leaves in the wind. "Trust me, Sophie." With one last push, Claire got her daughter through the window before climbing in after her. Cutting through the glass brought a sting to Claire's arms, blood pulsed from her fingers, but she jerked forward, searching for signs of a way to outrun whatever lay behind them. The woods loomed darkly, branches clawing at them like skeletal hands. All around, the night was alive, and the shadows still whispered, faint echoes bleeding into a terrifying lull. "Mommy," Sophie's voice cracked, suspending Claire's resolve. "We'll find a way," she replied, fear gripping her heart even as she said it. But ahead, a flickering light caught Claire's attention. Hope. Or another trap. With the specter of doom looming behind them, she grabbed Sophie's hand tighter, and they plunged into the woods, hearts racing, not knowing what awaited them, what truths awaited them beyond the shadows. The dense canopy of trees swallowed Claire and Sophie as they fled into the night, the sound of rustling leaves and snapping branches echoing in the oppressive dark. Wind whipped past them, carrying away the haunting whispers that had chased them for so long. But even as they ran, Claire felt dread cling to her, like the shadows that had crept into their lives. "Mommy, where are we going?" Sophie's voice trembled, breaking the silence. The weight of fear and fatigue weighed heavily on Claire's heart. "We can't stop. We have to find a place to hide." Breathless, they continued deeper into the woods, guided only by sheer instinct and the flickering glow of hope that danced around the horizon of their thoughts. They skirted around a massive oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal arms. Somewhere in the distance, the malicious howl echoed again, reverberating through the night. Claire froze, listening intently, a reassurance that they were not yet safe. "We need to find that light," she murmured, determination coursing through her despite the dread suffocating her. Minutes felt like hours as they pressed on, stumbling into a clearing that opened the night sky above them. In the center stood an old stone altar bathed in an ethereal glow. The light was warm yet eerie, flickering like a dying flame. Claire's heart raced as she pulled Sophie toward it, thinking of a way to end this nightmare. "What if it's a trick?" Sophie whimpered, her small voice quaking. Maybe it is, Claire replied, but we have to try something. This can't go on any longer. She knelt down, clutching Sophie's face, searching her daughter's eyes. You trust me, right? Sophie nodded hesitantly, the trust in those innocent eyes igniting a fire in Claire's gut. As they approached the altar, strange markings carved into the stone revealed themselves, glowing softly as if they resonated with a power long forgotten. What is it? Sophie asked, an innocent curiosity bleeding into her fear. I don't know, Claire admitted, running her fingers across the ancient symbols. As she traced the carvings, the air shimmered and vibrated, and clarity hit her. If the darkness was tied to the painting, perhaps this could sever its grip. We need to break the connection, Claire said, her voice determined. If we perform a ritual, maybe we can make it release you. What's a ritual? Sophie asked, eyes wide. It's a way to cast away bad spirits, like cleansing them. Smiling despite her fear, Claire remembered snippets of old lore she'd read in the town library. Sophie nodded, sharing the determined spark that ignited within Claire. Okay. We need to stand together. Claire took a deep breath, gathering strength as the shadows pressed ever closer, aching to envelop them. Focus, Sophie. They clasped hands in front of the altar, closed their eyes, and summoned every ounce of love and purity they could muster. In unison, they began to chant the words Claire could barely remember, old prayers filled with hope and protection. The winds howled, swirling around them like a tempest, and shadows roiled at the edges of their vision. Claire could feel the air shift, the palpable tension of something dark straining against their intent. Don't stop. She urged through gritted teeth, feeling Sophie's tiny hand tremble in hers. Then, suddenly, the ground shook, and the shadows surged forward in a frenzied rush. You think you can hide? That familiar voice roared, the figure materializing out of the vortex, its face twisted and malevolent, swirling like a storm of terror. Let her go. Claire screamed, channeling every ounce of motherly wrath she had. In that moment, the altar burst with light, illuminating the entire clearing and pushing back against the shadows that clawed for their return. The voice wailed, in a crescendo that rattled Claire's bones, but she planted her feet firmly, keeping Sophie's grip tight. This is our moment. The shadows recoiled, hissing and retreating under the power of the light. It grew brighter, warm and fierce, drawing the dark, pulling it back into the void from which it came. Claire felt the connection sever just as shadows coiled around the altar, yanking at Sophie, trying to reclaim what they had lost. No. Claire howled, focusing all her love into that moment. Each chant resonated with their shared strength, each word dispelling the chill that threatened to drown them. Then, with a final piercing scream, the darkness shattered like glass, scattering into a million flickering sparks that winked out into nothingness. The wind died down, and silence enveloped the clearing, leaving Claire gasping. What happened? Sophie's voice wobbled, still trembling. I think we did it, Claire replied, relief flooding her as she wrapped Sophie in her arms. They had conquered the darkness, not just for themselves but for the lost souls tied to that horrific portrait. As dawn broke, they stepped away from the altar, illuminated softly by the first rays of sunlight. The woods that had once felt claustrophobic began to open up, allowing the warmth of hope to seep in. Claire turned back one last time, remembering the darkness they had faced. I won't forget you, she whispered, feeling an odd sense of peace wash over her as the last wisps of shadows dissolved into dawn. Hand in hand, Claire and Sophie made their way home, hearts lighter, the burden of fear lifted like a vanished nightmare. As they walked back towards their lives, Claire felt an unbreakable bond formed, invisible to the eye, a connection forged in love and courage. Each step carried with it the weight of survival and a fierce promise: they would stand united against whatever other horrors may come. Mommy, can we draw the sun when we get home? Sophie asked, brightening with youthful innocence. Absolutely, Claire smiled, a warm flutter igniting in her chest. The shadows were gone, the portrait a distant memory, a reminder of the battle. Now, they were ready to embrace every new day. Together, they reached the threshold of their home, the door standing wide open to greet them. They had fought the darkness, now, they could rebuild their light. And what they learned would remain: a fierce, unyielding love could conquer even the darkest of nightmares. Before you go, listen closely. You need to subscribe now so you won't miss any exclusive stories that are coming next. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to help us feed the algorithm and reach even more eager ears. I want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Every thought matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us spread this journey together.